It started like a regular weekend getaway, a remote cabin in the woods, the kind of solitude I craved after weeks of nonstop work. I just wanted peace. I should have known better. The cabin was deep in the woods, miles from the nearest road, surrounded by towering trees. I arrived late in the afternoon, the sun casting long shadows over the forest floor. Everything seemed normal, even tranquil. But that night things changed. I was unpacking when I heard it, a faint rustling outside the cabin like someone, or something, moving through the trees. At first I brushed it off as wildlife. But as the hours ticked by, the noise grew louder, more deliberate. And then came the footsteps, slow and heavy, circling the cabin. I looked out the window, scanning the dark woods. Nothing. The silence was unsettling, thick with the feeling of being watched. But there was no one there. Or so I thought. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing the footsteps, always just beyond the clearing but never close enough to see who, or what, was out there. The next morning I found something. Footprints. Fresh ones, deep in the mud, circling the cabin. They were too large to be human but too precise to be an animal. I should have left then, but I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just imagining things. I went about my day, but the feeling of being watched never left me. The forest, once peaceful, felt oppressive, like the trees were hiding something. By dusk, the footsteps had returned, circling again, always out of sight. By the third night I was on edge. I locked the doors, shut all the windows and kept the lights on. But it didn't help. I could feel them outside, whoever or whatever was out there. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and decided to confront it, to end the creeping fear that had taken hold of me. As I stepped outside, the footsteps stopped. The air was unnaturally still and the silence pressed in on me. My flashlight flickered as I scanned the trees, but I didn't see anything. That's when I heard the voice, a low, raspy whisper coming from the darkness. "You shouldn't be here." My heart raced. I spun around, shining the light into the forest, but no one was there. The whispering continued, more voices now, all around me but always just out of sight. I ran back into the cabin, slamming the door shut, my mind racing. I knew I had to leave. Whatever was out there wasn't human. But when I reached for my car keys, I realized they were gone. Panic set in. The whispers grew louder, filling the cabin, coming from everywhere and nowhere. I was trapped. I don't know how I made it through that night. By dawn, the voices stopped, and the forest was eerily quiet again. I ran. I didn't care where, I just needed to get away. When I finally reached the nearest town, I called the police. They searched the area but found nothing. No footprints. No signs of anyone being there. Just an empty, silent cabin. But I know what I heard. What I felt. They were watching me. And they're still out there, waiting for the next person to wander too deep into the woods.
It was supposed to be a routine job. My construction crew and I were digging the foundation for a new building just outside the city. The project was going smoothly until one of the guys called me over, pointing to something buried deep in the dirt. A massive iron door, ancient-looking and covered in rust. It wasn't on any blueprint, and city records had no mention of it. Curiosity got the best of me. Instead of reporting it, I decided to open it up. After hours of struggle, the door finally groaned open, revealing a stone staircase leading into the darkness. Ignoring the chill in the air, I grabbed my flashlight and went down alone, my footsteps echoing through the narrow, claustrophobic passage. The stairs seemed endless, twisting and descending deeper than I'd imagined. Finally, I reached a cavernous chamber, lined with decaying stone pillars and strange symbols etched into the walls. At the room's center was a stone slab, raised like an altar, and on it was something I can hardly describe. A mummified body, grotesquely distorted, with arms too long and empty black eyes staring straight ahead. I felt an urge to turn and run, but as I stepped back, the entire room began to shake. Dust filled the air, and the walls groaned, as if the earth itself was waking up. I started toward the stairs when I heard it, a low, dragging sound, like something heavy shifting behind me. My heart pounding, I turned to see the body on the slab slowly sitting up, its head turning, empty eyes locking onto me. I sprinted up the stairs, the sound of dragging footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I burst into daylight, collapsing on the ground, gasping for air. My crew looked at me in confusion, but I couldn't speak. We sealed the door and buried it, trying to erase any trace of what we'd uncovered. But I still hear that dragging sound sometimes in my dreams, reminding me that whatever was down there isn't gone. It's waiting just below the surface.
It was my first week in the new apartment, a cheap place on the edge of town. The building was old, with creaky floors and dimly lit hallways, but I didn't mind. I just needed a place to crash after long days at work. However, there was one rule that struck me as odd. Do not go into the basement after dark. Naturally, my curiosity got the best of me. One night, when the building was quiet, I took my flashlight and headed down the rickety stairs to the basement. It was colder than I expected, the air thick with mildew and something else, a faint, sickly sweet smell that I couldn't quite place. The single, flickering bulb barely lit the room, casting eerie shadows on the cracked concrete walls. As I walked deeper into the basement, I noticed strange symbols scratched into the walls and floors. Then I heard it, a faint shuffling sound from behind a row of old lockers. Heart pounding, I called out, but there was no response. The silence grew heavier, almost oppressive, until I felt something cold brush against my arm. I swung my flashlight around, catching a glimpse of a figure in the darkness. Its face was pale, twisted, with hollow, sunken eyes staring straight through me. I stumbled back, and the figure disappeared into the shadows, but the shuffling sounds grew louder, surrounding me. The air thickened, and I could barely breathe, as if the room itself was alive, closing in on me. Panicking, I sprinted back to the stairs, only to find the door had somehow locked from the outside. I pounded on it, my voice hoarse, but no one heard me. Then, a whisper crept through the darkness, repeating my name in a chilling, distorted voice. After what felt like an eternity, I finally heard footsteps outside. The building manager opened the door, eyes wide, and yanked me out of there, slamming it shut behind us. "I told you not to go down there after dark," he whispered, his face pale. I moved out the next day, but even now, sometimes I hear that whisper in my dreams, calling my name, reminding me of what I left behind in the basement.